one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball.
Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win. Now the 2-1. Line drive to the base hit. Justice has scored the tying run. Green to the plate. And he is safe. Safe at the plate. The Braves go to the World Series.
Have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines that sat when they were children and cheered their heroes.
Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable!
A 3-run home run for Bucky Dent. The Yankees now lead by a score of 3-2.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mazeroski has hit a 1-0 pitch over the left field fence at Forbes Field to win the 1960 World Series.
They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past.
The Pope arrived at Yankee Stadium. As one enthusiastic announcer put it, he is standing on second base.
Reggie Jackson. Long drive right field. It is goodbye. Big World Series for Reggie Jackson.
The Blue Jays are World Series champions as Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run.
Racket throws. There's a left back. It's going to be, I believe, the Giants from the pennant. The Giants from the pennant. The Giants from the pennant.
The 0-1 pitch. A liner off Nagy's glove into center field. The Florida Marlins have won the World Series.
The memories will be so thick that I can brush them away from their faces.
The 1-0 delivery to Fisk. He swings long drive left field. If it stays fair, it's gone. Home run. The Red Sox win. And the series is...
Lolis fires. Ball is hit high in the air. This should be the series. Freehand waving everybody away in foul territory. Detroit wins.
Here's the pitch to Willie. Here's a liner straight to Richardson. The ball game is over and the World Series is over. Willie McCovey hit it like a bullet. A line drive right.
Baseball to mark the time.
The Oakland A's take. I'll tell you what, we're having an earth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Candlestick Park for Game 3 of the 1989 World Series.
It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again.
Frank Robinson, the right-hand batter.
Long drive to left field. Way back. Gets it goodbye. Home run.
Base hit loaded, 1 out. Pena in a jam. The Twins are going to win the World Series. The Twins have won it.
Ozzie with 1 out. Smith corks one into right down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy. It's a home run. And the
Willie Mays just brought this crowd to its feet with a catch, which must have been an optical illusion to a lot of people.
This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again.
Broadcasted live.
Who wants to have some fun?
There are balls coming from all over the place. Left field, center field, right field. See, this is the kind of thing, quite honestly, right now, that makes you want to see the Chicago Cubs team lose.
Now, you just saying you want to have fun, or do you really want to have fun?
It'll be fun.
Will the next person that sees anybody throw anything onto this field, point them out, or get them out of here? You don't live in Cleveland. You live in Cincinnati.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
That is the farthest thing in the universe from the truth.
Hello, everyone, live. It's the Dan Scott Show. And right there is your host, Dan Scott.
Hi, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the program. I am your host, Dan Scott, and we are very happy to be back in the saddle again this morning. First studio show in about 9 days. Of course, last week at this time, we were doing some live video updates from the Southern Conference Baseball Tournament at Fluor Field at the West End. And after that was all said and done, took a couple of days to unwind, invariably got back to the studio, and there were some computer issues that needed to be addressed and some other things going on. But back at it today, and man, we have got a busy, busy show for you over the course of the next hour. We're going to start off by just kind of wrapping up some things, some final thoughts that I've got on Furman baseball for 2018. And of course, the NCAA tournament, the regionals start this weekend. And if we have some time, we may get into that as well. If not, we'll spend a lot more time on those tomorrow. But a couple of guests today, one via phone and a couple of guys who will be in studio here in the final segment. The phone guest today is a guy by the name of Peter Kerasotis. He is a sports writer and an author now who's written a new book called Alou, My Baseball Journey, and he co-authored it with Felipe Alou. It's a fantastic book that talks about the trailblazer that Felipe Alou was for players coming out of the Dominican Republic. And there are a lot of unique twists and turns, and Peter Kerasotis is going to talk to us about those and why he decided to write this book on the all-time winningest manager in the history of the Montreal Expos, played in the big leagues for 17 years, one of three Alou brothers who made it to the big leagues. In fact, with the San Francisco Giants, at least one game, the entire outfield was Matty Alou, Jesus Alou, and Felipe Alou, which has never happened in the history of the game. There was actually a fourth Alou brother who could have been a big leaguer, but decided to go in another direction. We'll talk to Peter Kerasotis about that. By the way, those of you who've been with me in various stages of this show over the years, invariably when the Masters rolls around, you hear me tell a story almost every year about a sports writer friend of mine who the very first round of golf he ever played in his life was at Augusta National in the Media Day lottery that they do, or at least used to do, on the Monday after the Masters is completed. And I've told that story, and people say, oh, you're just making that up. I will be vindicated today because Peter Kerasotis is that journalist, and he will tell us that story during his time with us here today as well. It's fun stuff, and looking forward to spending that time with him. And then at the end of the program, going to deviate from the world of sports a little bit and bring in Heath Burdette and his father. You have seen us on a daily basis talk about the Walk a Mile project, and you see the website there on your screen, thewhamproject.org. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that does many different things in the world of missions. They do things themselves, but they equip and train other people and other churches to go on mission trips. They're going to be in here to talk about why this is their mission and a little bit about what it looks like, and just to give you some more information about the Walk a Mile project. We feel like we've got a little bit of a higher calling than just sports here, and we're going to explore that a bit today with Heath Burdette and his father at the end of the program coming up at 10:45. So we've got a lot to get to, and we look forward to having you along for the ride here today. I got to tell you that nobody likes a good rainstorm better than me. The only time that I don't want it to rain is during baseball season, and goodness knows at the end of the year we got enough of that. The rain has been ridiculous, and I think everybody knows that. The flooding and everything else that has happened here in the upstate and western North Carolina, there have been some very, very dangerous situations, some devastating floods, mudslides, all sorts of things have happened because of the torrential rain that we've had here almost nonstop for about 2 weeks now. And around all of that, today is a funeral ceremony. You remember the 2 journalists from WYFF4 that were killed earlier this week when a tree fell on their car while they were out covering a story in McDowell County, North Carolina. Those funerals are today. I would just ask you at some point today to pause for a moment, say a quick prayer for their families, for their co-workers, for their friends. This has devastated a lot of people, and that is not an understatement. And when you're in the business that we are in, it catches your attention even that much more because we're always on the road, we're always doing things, and while I'm not out covering stories like that anymore, like I used to in an earlier stage of my career. You go about your day-to-day business. For me, this is routine. For them, that was routine. And you never really think about the fact that you may not come home that night. And unfortunately, that's what happened for these 2 guys from WYFF Channel 4. So our thoughts and prayers continue to go out for them, and would hope that you would do the same at some point today, because the funerals are today. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back, and when we do, on the other side, we'll talk a bit about Furman baseball, wrap up 2018. From my standpoint, I'm going to try to get Brett Harker in here for his wrap next week if he's available. But we'll get into that, and then at 10:25, Peter Kerasotis will join us on the phone to talk about his new book about Felipe Alou. All that and more still ahead on this edition of the Dan Scott Show, and we'll return in just a moment. The Atlanta Bread Company wants to make your dining experience as convenient as possible, especially if you're ordering takeout. Go online to atlantabreadcompany.com, place your order there, and pay for it too. Then, when you get to the restaurant at Cherrydale Point, you breeze right by the cash registers and go straight to the pickup counter where your food will be waiting. And speaking of food, try the new Shrimp Po' Boy, a delicious and surprisingly healthy addition to the already great menu. That's the Atlanta Bread Company, Cherrydale Point in Greenville.
Holding, number 79, defense, first down. I'm also holding a party tonight.
Great call by the official. Looks like we've got another flag on the field.
Holding, a Pepsi. Necessary refreshment.
Hey, Ted, bring some of that Pepsi to my party.
Pepsi and the NFL. Welcome to the Fun Doesn't End Zone.
When the Furman baseball team goes on the road, it travels safely, comfortably, and with the latest technology with Jeans Tours and Charters. Jeans has been a Furman favorite for decades and has serviced Furman baseball for over 20 years. Take it from head coach Brett Harker. Book your next road trip with Jeans. Jeans Tours and Charters online at jeansbussvc.com or call 864-242-1673. Jeans Tours and Charters, servicing the upstate since 1980.
If you've been sidelined by an injury, the St. Francis Sports Medicine team is here 24/7 to get you back on the field. Our highly trained network of physicians, athletic trainers, and physical therapists treat all types of sports-related injuries, even those that don't occur from playing a sport. Call the St. Francis Hurt Line at 675-HU-RT for priority appointments or at-home advice. Again, that's 675-HU-RT.
All right, we are back. It is Thursday. It is 11 minutes past the hour of 10 a.m. here in the East, and we're happy to have you with us as we get this hour really rolling now, going with you up until 11 o'clock, maybe a little beyond, depending on how our conversation with Heath Burdette and his father goes, starting about 10:45. Peter Kerasotis coming up at 10:25, again, to talk about his new book, the book about Felipe Alou, which you're really going to want to get a copy of. I need to tell you quickly, before we get any further into this, about our friends at Security Complete. They are a locally owned security company based in Liberty, but they serve the entire upstate. The two guys who run it have more than 40 years combined experience in the security industry. And if you've been paying attention for the last couple of months, you know that I switched my security system and how I protect my home and my family from to Security Complete from the previous company I was with, and for a litany of reasons. Bottom line, though, these guys, as I said, locally owned, so you know who you're dealing with, and you get top-of-the-line technology. You're not locked into any kind of a contract. They are going to save you money coming and going. You see the phone number, 546-0360. They're on Facebook. They're on Twitter. You can find them at Security Complete there. Folks, businesses, homes all across the upstate are finding out why Security Complete is the best choice for their security, and I would urge you to do the same thing. Tell them you heard about them right here on the Dan Scott Show. I just got this note that came across Twitter, by the way, from a Furman perspective. They have announced the inductees into the 2018 Hall of Fame, and that'll take place during football season coming up in 3 or 4 months. And it came across now, so I did not have time to get the graphic switched over where I could put it up on the screen. But I'll just read this. The Furman Hall of Fame class of 2018 will consist of the following: Hal Henderson, who was a men's basketball player from 89 to 92. David Anderson, who ran track and field and cross country from 1974 to 77. Men's golfer Matt Davidson, who was here from 2000 to 2004. Women's soccer standout Andrea Morrison Maslow, who was here from 2002 to 2005. And a pair of honorary inductees will go into the Furman Hall of Fame class of 2018, David and Carol Malden. We'll obviously be telling you much more about all of that as we get closer to that, but congratulations to the Furman Hall of Fame class 2018. Well, the Paladin baseball season did not end the way that we hoped it would. Coming up with a pair of losses right out of the gate in the Southern Conference tournament last week to get eliminated, and this, of course, was 1 year after making the run to Championship Sunday and forcing a winner-take-all championship game before losing to North Carolina Greensboro. And the tournament was full of surprises, the biggest surprise being Western Carolina, which had won only 7 games all season long, winning 3 games in the tournament before they were finally knocked out. UNCG, who was the number 1 seed going in, getting knocked out in the span of 3 games and losing their opener to Western Carolina. Samford did what Samford had been doing most of the year, and that is just pitching lights out. And as the tournament went on, their offense came along, and they went through and won 4 games and without a loss and won it, and they are the SoCon's representative in the tournament field. And, you know, as is always the case, whether it's because of rain or just because of the slower pace of play that you get in tournament baseball, games can drag on and take forever. There were a litany of 3-hour games, a couple of 4-hour games that went into, extra innings or at least took that long to get through 9. And yet Furman's 2 games combined, off the top of my head now, were 4 hours and 41 minutes. They were both very well-pitched games and had a great pace to them. Bottom line was Paladins just could not score any runs. The loss to Samford on Wednesday of last week, the opener, a 4-0 loss. That was 1-0 going to the 8th inning. Had a couple of little opportunities early, but when they brought Wyatt Burns in to begin the 7th inning, he just flat shut the door down. And then in the losers bracket game, dropping a 5-2 decision. Again, just never really got any offense going. Ben Anderson, the outstanding freshman who was the lone Paladin to get on one of the first team SoCon teams for the regular season was hitless in the tournament, and he was not the only one. It was a tough way to have the season end, but in a lot of ways was kind of a microcosm of the season itself, in the fact that there were some moments that they did a lot of things right, but they just couldn't really pull the trigger enough times to get over the hump, and it was that kind of year for the Paladins. In a lot of ways, a year ago, we made so much of, and rightly so, of the 9-game losing streak that was the culmination of a stretch where they lost 17 out of 20, and then turn around and win 20 of your final 28 games, taking it all the way to Championship Sunday and that winner-take-all matchup. Never had a run like that. They did have an 8-game losing streak at one point this year, but that was about the extent of it. But unless I'm mistaken, and I don't have it in front of me now, so forgive me, I don't think the team won more than 4 games in a row all season long. So they never really put together a run. There were some great moments. You go back and you look at the Georgia State game here at Latham Stadium when they were down 10-0 and came back and won that game 13-12. The final margin coming on the grand slam home run with 2 outs in the 8th inning by Jabari Richards. There were some individual moments, but by and large, this team was never able to kind of capture the magic of the previous team. And that happens from time to time. I mean, you can have a lot of the same cast of characters, but every team is different. Every locker room is different. And while the team chemistry was good, the locker room was good, for whatever reason, it just never completely came together for a long enough stretch to build any kind of lasting momentum. And having said that, again, there were some awfully good moments, and I think the best thing is there are some wonderful things to be greatly encouraged about moving forward, looking ahead to 2019. We mentioned Ben Anderson and the incredible season he had as a freshman. Matt Lazaro, who came back after being out a month, a little more than a month, in fact, and then pitching 2 really, really strong innings in relief the other night, in the Thursday game, the elimination game for the Paladins, looked really good. That young man has an incredibly bright future. In fact, Brett Harker says that Anderson and Lazaro, from a position player and a pitcher, are the future faces of this Furman program moving forward. You can understand why. Jordan Beetson, another walk-on, showed us some incredible things at times this year. Maybe no greater story from a walk-on to a bullpen guy to a midweek guy to a weekend starter guy than John Michael Bertrand, who won the Carter Grote Award at the team's banquet prior to the SoCon tournament. So a lot to be encouraged about. The rotation will come back intact next year. They will also, with the exception of Grant Sherman, of course, who has graduated now and is moving on, but you have Verbeck back, you have Bertrand back, you have Lazaro back. You will have, if all goes according to plan, a healthy David Dunleavy, who missed all of last year recovering from Tommy John surgery. He probably would have been, if healthy, the Friday night guy for the Paladins in 2018, so they'll have him back in the mix in 2019. So a lot to be excited about. Some talented freshmen who are on the way in, but they have to learn how to play the game at this level. I will say this, when it's all said and done, the season did not end the way that every one of us associated with the program and with Furman University wanted it to. However, I consider myself, again, blessed to have been behind the microphone and to have been able to narrate this 2018 season for our fan base, and I look forward to doing it again in 2019. So, as I said, we'll get Brett Harker in before too much longer when his schedule allows, and get his thoughts wrapping up, and get a little bit of a snapshot of what his coaches are doing. You know, they're on the road already. recruiting, and so we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. And looking ahead to 2019, fall practice will be here before you know it, and events accelerate rapidly, especially when you get older, as I think a lot of you know now. We'll start football season. Next thing you know, basketball practice will start. We'll start basketball games in November, and then it'll be the third week of February, and I'll be back home in the press box at Latham Stadium. So just, Lord willing, that's how it'll all work out, and it'll all go rather rapidly, at least it seems to as you get older. But anyway, thanks to everybody who supported us in what we do broadcast-wise, and we get to crank it all up starting again come football season on September 1st, which will be my 29th wedding anniversary when the Paladins open up at Clemson. How about that? All right, to break we go. When we come back, Peter Kerasotis will join us, and we'll talk about his brand new book called Alou, My Baseball Journey. Peter Kerasotis and Felipe Alou collaborating on the book, and we'll return in just a moment.
Hey Furman fans, it's baseball season. Here at Ingalls, we know that as you root for the home team, sometimes you want more than just peanuts and Cracker Jack. And while we do deliver on your favorite ballpark classics, we're proud to offer a packed lineup of everything you need to make your next meal a home run. Ingalls, a proud sponsor of Furman Baseball and the official grocery store of Furman Athletics. Go Dins!
Life's healthier when you're backed by a Greenville Health System primary care doctor. Because then, the doctor that has your back is backed by the more than 1,000 physicians and specialists at the region's leading health system, all working together to bring you the right care in the right place at the right time. Great health starts with a GHS primary care doctor, and there are more than 200 of them conveniently located throughout the upstate, ready to see you. Find yours today at ghs.org/mydoctor.
Zaxby's food has always brought people together, catering to the big moments, the little wins, the long talks, and the quick getaways. Because food this inviting is bound to add a lot of flavor to your life.
Introducing the Zax Pack. Served with chicken fingers, sides, Texas toast, and iced tea. Pick one up for dinner or your next event. Friends, family, flavor. Zaxby's. Indescribably good.
I was surprised recently when I learned that Americans spend $80 billion a year on illegal sports gambling. Sure, that's spread out over millions of gamblers, but still it makes you wonder where that money's coming from. Unfortunately, too often it's coming from money that was intended to buy groceries, pay the mortgage, or even put children through college. If gambling's had a negative impact on your life, call the SC Gambling Hotline toll-free at 877-452-5155. Help is confidential and available 24 hours a day. A message from the South Carolina Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services.
The Atlanta Bread Company wants to make your dining experience as convenient as possible, especially if you're ordering takeout. Go online to atlantabreadcompany.com, place your order there, and pay for it too. Then, when you get to the restaurant at Cherrydale Point, you breeze right by the cash registers and go straight to the pickup counter where your food will be waiting. And speaking of food, try the new Shrimp Po' Boy, a delicious and surprisingly healthy addition to the already great menu. That's the Atlanta Bread Company, Cherrydale Point in Greenville. All right, welcome back. It is 10:25 on the nose. I am your host, Dan Scott. Very happy to have you with us as we continue. Coming up at 10:45, Heath Burdette of the Walk a Mile Project will be here in studio with us, and we'll be talking about that organization and all the great work that they're doing both locally and abroad. Right now, though, as we've been promising you, we're going to the celebrity guest line. When I was 24, 25 years old back in 91 and 92, working for a weekly newspaper in Titusville, Florida called the Star Advocate, I also got an opportunity to do some writing on a freelance basis for the parent paper, the Florida Today, and came across this gentleman who was kind enough to befriend me and got a chance to watch a guy who I have considered all these years to be one of the best in the business go about his craft. Peter Kerasotis has written a new book with Felipe Alou called Alou, My Baseball Journey, and he joins us here to talk about that book, among other things, on the program today. Peter, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and as I said that, I got to thinking, well, that probably makes him feel old because it made me feel old as well.
I just turned 60.
Well, you know what? That's not as bad as I thought. Then I just turned 51 back in April, so we're not that far apart.
No, the gap closes rather than widens the older we all get.
Yeah, it's
9 years when we were kids was a lifetime.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, isn't it? It's good to hear from you again, and I appreciate you answering when I reached out to you on Twitter when I saw the book and saw that you had joined the world of social media. I had to reach out because people here know that as much as I love all sports, baseball is my thing, and to get an opportunity to talk to you about this book and this subject, I thought would be a good deal. So I appreciate you being willing to spend a little time with us. You've been doing quite a few of these from what I understand.
I've done 4 books. I should know that right off the top of my head. 4, and I'm working on a 5th.
Go ahead.
This one, Dan, this one is really special for your listeners who may not know, because Felipe Alou is he's going to be 83. Felipe was the first guy to leave the Dominican Republic and become a major league player, and now the Dominican produces more major league players than any other country outside of the United States. That small Caribbean island, some great players. You know, the Albert Pujols and the Pedro Martinez's, and the list is on and on and on. The first guy to leave that island, so he is their Jackie Robinson in many ways, because the book kind of weaves in and out of what Latino players like him encountered when they came to this country, which was double racism, not just from white America, obviously, but also black America, because the black communities would embrace the Latinos to a degree. They were still second-class citizens in the black communities because they were from another country. They didn't speak English at all or not very well. You know, you can go to our barbershops, you can eat at our little places, but, you know, don't be dating our women. You know, things like that. Mm-hmm. First Dominican to play in the World Series. First Dominican to become a major league manager. Borderline Hall of Fame career as a player. The 3 brothers together, Felipe and then Matty and then Jesus, all of them very good players. At one time, historically played all 3 outfield positions together for the San Francisco Giants. He is the only man to have played in the first season the Giants had in San Francisco and the first season the Braves had, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with them because of the proximity to Atlanta. The first played not only for the Giants the first year in San Francisco, but the Braves the first year in Atlanta. Father of Moises Alou, who was a great player also. So he has a very rich baseball story and a very rich family story as well. And that's what we captured in his autobiography in this book. Close friends with Roberto Clemente. There's a whole chapter about their brotherhood kind of friendship that they had. Roomed with Joe Torre when they both played for the Braves. You know, just a lot. He was Barry Bonds' manager when Bonds broke the home run record. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things in that book, a lot of layers to it. And he is a very, very revered figure in baseball amongst people who really know him. Tony La Russa got a hold of the I can say got a hold. He read the manuscript and provided a blurb for the back of the book. And he's just been raving about it. I keep hearing from people around the country, I've been hearing about this book, or before it actually published, I've been hearing about this book coming out. Where are you hearing about it? You know, Tony La Russa's been really talking about it. So I'm very, you know, I've done several books, but this one, Dan, is I knew I had some gold nuggets going in. I really struck a gold mine with this story.
Well, Peter, what was your prior connection to Felipe Alou, and why did you decide to do this book?
Well, it's interesting you asked that because, you know, you lived in this area, And you remember when I was a columnist at Florida Today, and as a columnist, I was always looking for ideas. And spring training, when the Marlins used to be in Vieira, which is in Brevard County, when, as you know, your listeners, it's all the same county here, Titusville, where you worked, and where I worked in Central Brevard, South Brevard, and Vieira. And the Marlins were there, and I was looking at rosters and different teams that were coming in and trying to generate some column ideas. And I happened to be looking at Felipe Alou's bio when he was the manager of the Expos, and the Expos were still a team, Montreal Expos. And I saw he started his career in Cocoa, Florida, as a minor leaguer at the old Provost Park where the Cocoa Indians played. And so when the Expos came up, I introduced myself during batting practice. Mr. Alou, I'm so-and-so, I'm a local columnist. I don't know if you remember, but you started your career about 5-10 miles from here in Cocoa. Do you remember anything about it? And Dan, you're always looking for a local connection.
Right.
Well, he not only remembered that he led the league with a .380 batting average, led him in stolen bases. He remembered the street he lived on, that family that housed him. Then he started to tell me how he really started his career in Lake Charles, Louisiana, in the Evangeline League, but they wouldn't let him play because he was black. They actually passed a law because they didn't want blacks working with whites, and he only got 9 at-bats, and there was a white family that housed him, and he'd have to crouch down below the window whenever he was going to the ballpark with them or coming home. They actually put their lives in danger, and his life was in danger. And so the Giants, seeing that he wasn't going to be able to play there, sent him to Cocoa. And he said, I was on a Greyhound bus, and he starts to tell me this story about how his dream was to become a doctor, and he was in school at the University of Santo Domingo to become a doctor, the oldest of 6 children. That was his goal. That was what he wanted to do ever since he was a kid. He played in the Pan Am Games, led them to the gold medal, beat the United States. A scout came, offered him 200 pesos to sign. He says, my dad owed the grocer 200 pesos. The family was really struggling. I gave up my dream of becoming a doctor to pay the grocery bill. Now I'm on this Greyhound bus heading to Florida. And he goes, all I knew was the last stop was Miami, and I just wanted to go all the way to Miami, get a flight, and go back home. But I had signed a contract, and then he goes, and 2 years later, I decided to stay. I played in Cocoa, and 2 years after that, I'm in the outfield with Willie Mays. And I'm thinking, this guy's pretty interesting. So about the time I was getting laid off from Florida Today, I was scheduled to be down in Miami when the Giants were playing the Marlins, and Bruce Bochy is a local guy here, as you know, from Melbourne, Florida. And I got laid off the next day. I said, I'm going to go down anyway. I'll catch some baseball, kind of get my bearings. And I was in Bruce's office, and Bruce asked me, he found that he had heard, and he was upset. And Bruce and I are friends. He's the manager of the Giants. We're friends and went to Brevard Community College, and all that. His wife is from here. And he's, what are you going to do? And I said, Bruce, all of us in print journalism were in this line. I said, I just didn't know where my spot was, but my spot was yesterday. And he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I got some ideas. I said, I always thought Felipe Alou would be a good book. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, he's here today. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, he's here. He works for the Giants. He goes, I came after him as the manager, and they kicked him upstairs, and he became an assistant to the GM. He lives in South Florida. Said, you want me to talk to him? And that started a process of communicating with Felipe, and it took me about 4 years to get him to agree to do the book. And I'm glad he finally did, and I know he is as well, because it's getting some really good reviews. If people go to YouTube and type in Gary Thorne, Thorne, the Orioles announcer for Masson, he really did an excellent, very moving review of this book, and it's just gaining traction. It's doing well, and I think it's an important book, and I really think people will enjoy it, even if they're not baseball fans, but especially if they are.
We are visiting with Peter Kerasotis, who is the author of the book Alou, My Baseball Journey with Felipe Alou. He also is a 10-time Associated Press Sports Editor Award winner, 6 times a Football Writers Association of America award winner, and 7 times Florida Sports Writers Association award winner. You mentioned Tony La Russa, who did a blurb for the book. Joe Torre did one. Reggie Jackson did one. And then, interestingly enough, Pedro Martinez did the foreword. And so here's a guy later who benefited from the trail that Felipe Alou blazed, getting a chance to pay some homage by doing the foreword in this book.
Yeah, we had a lot of candidates for that forward, including just about everybody who wrote a blurb on the back. As you mentioned, were all candidates. Pedro was very, very hard to get a hold of. And Felipe was getting frustrated by that, and we were looking at Plan B. And Gordon Eads, writer who now works for the Boston Red Sox, finally got me connected with Pedro. And I talked to him for about 10, 15 minutes on the phone, and I could tell he was going to be excellent to write the forward. And he said, I don't have time today. Why don't we schedule some time next week? Well, it took us about 5 months to get a hold of him for that conversation, and then it took me about another 5 months to get a hold of him again. But when he and I talked, a lot of people have said he really sets the tone for this book, and he considers Felipe to be like his second father. And I've gotten real close with Moises Alou's sister, his older sister, Maria. And Maria used to kind of take care of Pedro when Pedro was a young player and cook for him, and they're close friends as well. And Pedro is very intelligent, as is Felipe. And he just, we talked on the phone. I recorded it, wrote it, emailed it to him, and signed off on it. And Felipe, one of the interesting things he told me, Dan, was, he goes, in my country, in the Dominican, when you're in elementary school and you're learning Dominican history, Felipe Alou is in our history books. The Alou brothers, you study and learn about Felipe Alou and the Alou brothers, just like maybe in this country you might learn about Babe Ruth in a history book or something. They are in the history books there. And as I mentioned, he's the pioneer, he's the trailblazer, and he just had some wonderful things to say and some wonderful stories to share in that forward. It really set the tone. And
you mentioned how many players have come out of the Dominican Republic since Felipe Alou laid the groundwork for that to happen, and what in many ways what a poor country that is. My wife a number of years ago went on a mission trip to the Dominican Republic and got to see what you don't see in tourism magazines, right, and tourism commercials, and got to see some of the things. So to see those kids rising up out of that kind of abject poverty, and baseball, whether they're getting off the island or not, baseball is such a passion down there, Peter, and you've been able to capture kind of that passion in this book, and the passion that ultimately was able to get more and more and more of those Dominican players into Major League Baseball.
Yeah, he grew up, you talk about abject poverty, he grew up in a 15 by 15 foot shack, oldest of 6 kids, and his parents grew up sleeping literally on a dirt floor, and, emerges out of there and confronts the racism that he faced in this country. And, he understood the racism academically, but in real time, he didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. And his mother was white and father black. We made this big deal about Derek Jeter back in the 90s, this interracial player. Felipe Alou was an interracial player in 1958 when he broke in with the San Francisco Giants. To have risen out of what he did to become the first player, the first in the World Series, the first manager, now a front office executive, it's an amazing story, and they revere him in the Dominican Republic. And the Giants just built a state-of-the-art baseball academy there in the Dominican, as all of the teams now have baseball academies down there, and named it after him. He is a giant figure in that country, and they know what he did for them as far as, and he's told me, he goes, there were a lot of guys that came after me that could have been really good players, maybe even Hall of Fame players, but a lot of them could not deal with the cultural change, the language barrier, the racism. A lot of them came over in the minor leagues and then went back. And it wasn't easy. It was not easy, and it took somebody. Gary Thorne, in his video review, calls this the Jackie Robinson story from a Latino perspective. The first time we've actually gotten that perspective.
Peter Kerasotis, who co-authored the book with Felipe Alou, joining us here on the program as we continue to chat and talk about this remarkable man and his remarkable story. You mentioned his brothers, Matty and Jesus. There could have been a fourth Alou brother in the big leagues, except for a different path that Juan chose to take. Tell us that story briefly.
Yeah, so when he resisted in doing this book, he said, there's stories that are going to hurt people if I tell them, and I don't want to do that, but if I'm going to do this book, I've got to do it 100%. I'm not going to do it watered down. So when we finally sat down, and I drove down to his house in Boynton Beach, and we were talking, at one point, this first time we really sat down, and I didn't take out a notebook or a tape recorder, we just talked for hours. And all of a sudden I said, Felipe, 6 kids, were there ever any other brothers other than you, Matty, and Jesus? And he got quiet, and he said, yeah. And he took out his wallet, and he slapped down this ID on the table, and he said, you see this ID? In my country, you have to carry this ID everywhere you go. Not your driver's license, this ID. Well, what I never knew was that they had a dictator in the Dominican, Rafael Trujillo, who was brutal. He got assassinated in the early 60s, and it threw the country into revolutionary turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
And Juan was a college student, and he said Juan was probably the best out of all of us, a power hitter who could hit for average like Matty. He got caught up in the revolution, was detained once by U.S. troops who were occupying the island, then got detained a second time with about a dozen other guys by the rival Dominican faction. They asked for their IDs, and they saw his, and they said, are you related to the Alou brothers? And he said, yeah, they are my brothers. They separated him from the pack. Probably most of those other guys were executed. They took him to his parents, and they said, you better get him off this island. If you don't get him off this island, this is not going to end well. They gave him sort of a mulligan because they didn't want to kill one of the Alou brothers. I mean, they were revered, and all 3 other brothers were in the major leagues. So the family sent him to Puerto Rico. He went to school there, graduated summa cum laude as a civil engineer, and still lives in Puerto Rico. But that's how his path took him. And Felipe said, those are the stories that I don't really want to tell, but it's in the book, because just because his last name was Alou didn't mean he was any better than those other boys who lost their lives.
Right.
And their families, I don't want them to read it and feel like we think we're special and their lives were not as important. That's the kind of guy he is, the kind of man he is. And that's the story of the 4th Alou brother.
Yeah, instead of being grateful for that saving his brother's life, he was more concerned about the feelings of the others who probably lost their lives. That tells you a lot about the kind of man he is, regardless of what kind of ball player he was.
Exactly. And that his character, his stature, I mean, people that know him adore him. People who don't know him just remember he was a player and a manager. They'll really get quite a story if they read this book. And again, you don't have to be a baseball fan. I keep hearing that from people. I'm not a baseball fan, but I really love this book. It's an important book, I really feel, as far as a slice of not only baseball history, but American history as well, with this influx of Latinos that have come into this country through baseball, and he was one of the pioneers.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a phenomenal read. I highly encourage people to get it. I've been showing the book cover on the screen on and off during our interview here, but I'm actually holding up now. I've got my hard copy for people to see right here in my hands, thanks to you and the good folks at the University of Nebraska Press who sent me a review copy. I'm going to give you a chance to play Pitchman, Peter. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about here, but we want people to actually buy the book. So I'll give you a chance to play Pitchman. How can they get this phenomenal book that you co-authored with Felipe Alou?
The best way is Amazon. It's in bookstores around the country, but it's kind of hit and miss. I've been to some Barnes & Noble, and they have it. Some Barnes & Noble don't. But Amazon or the University of Nebraska Press website, Barnes & Noble website, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble website, Books A Million, all the standard places are where you can get this book. And also Apple Books. You can download it if you like to read on your device. There's a Kindle format on Amazon, and Apple has it in their EPUB format if you want to download it and read it on a tablet.
Now that's the kind of guy Peter Kerasotis is, folks. He got basically booted out of the newspaper industry because of all of the online media, and here he is promoting a way for you to read his book online. Does that's either tells you what kind of guy you are, or you don't care how you sell a book. You just want to sell it, right? Hey, before you go, I prompted our audience with this. In all the years that I did the talk show on the Clemson radio station, the flagship for Clemson, and all the years that I've done things in between, every time the Masters rolls around, every year invariably I ended up telling a story about this reporter I know who the first round of golf he ever played in his life was at Augusta National on the Monday after the Masters one year in the early 90s. And some people said, Dan, you're just making that story up. Today I am vindicated because Peter Kerasotis is that reporter. Tell us that story, Peter.
I think this was around 93, and I was working at Florida Today, and I had become the columnist, and our sports editor was a guy named Tom Squires. And the one perk that Tom would give himself every year was to go to the Masters with one of the writers on the staff. And he would help, or he might write a little sidebar, but that was his one perk. So he was after me to go with him. I really didn't want to go. I wasn't a golfer. I didn't really follow golf. I knew the Masters was the premier event. My dad was a golfer. And so one year, okay, well, let's go together. And, I wrote the columns that week. I think it was the year that I forget who won that year. But anyway.
Well, it had to be either 91 or 92 because those were the 2 years I was there. So it had to be.
Freddie Couples, I think it was the year Freddie Couples won.
Okay.
And so it was, early 90s. It probably was 92. And so we in Augusta, you have to rent houses, and we were people will go, like this woman would rent out her house every year to us, and she would go with her kid, and she'd just stay with her mother that week, and she'd rent out the house for $1,500. It was a nice little payday. So the Masters has a deal where you put your name in a hat, and the day after the final round on Sunday, providing there's no rain delay that kicks it over, they choose 20 journalists, media, print, broadcast, doesn't matter, 20 people, it's the lottery, and you get to play on Monday, and you get one of the caddies, the whole bit. So not only, and Tom had been going for years, Tom Squires, never won the lottery. Both of us won the lottery. We're both going to play Augusta National the next day. So here we are. We get back to this house that we're staying at, and he took his clubs with him every year just in case something like this would happen. He told me, if you're coming with me, get a set of golf clubs, just put them in the trunk. We're gonna enter. I took my dad's clubs with me. We win the lottery, and there we are late that Sunday night after I filed my column and all my work. It's like 11 o'clock, midnight, and we're out on the front lawn of this house that we're renting for the week, and he's giving me golf lessons. This is the Varden grip. This is a good grip. This is what you want to do on a tee shot. This is if you're going to chip it in, and when you're putting, this is, he's just giving me golf lessons. And then, of course, the next morning we get there, and that's the first time I ever played a round of golf was at Augusta National, and I broke 100. I broke 100, and then we played the back nine.
Yeah. There's always that but. And people have to understand too. This is a once in a lifetime thing, right? Once you get chosen, you can never play again.
Once you win the lottery, you're never able to enter the lottery again. It's a one and done deal. They know, they keep a record. You won the lottery. There's so many guys and women who want to play, So they tell you once you've won the lottery, you go into a database, and that's it. You got to play it once.
That's outstanding. As I said, today I'm vindicated because I've told that story before, and there have been people who've told me there's no way that's true. And I guess the other question is, did you retire after that? Have you played golf since?
I started playing golf after that, and I played for several years. And, during the Tiger Woods era, everybody was kind of fooling around with golf or getting interested in it. And I did play for a while, but, it's an expensive game. It's a time-consuming game, and I just kind of let things fall by the wayside, and I haven't really played in I would say about 10 years now. But I was playing for a while because of that.
Yeah.
And because of the popularity that came into the game when Tiger came on the scene.
It's an incredible story. People I've told that to who have believed me, their jaws just drop, and they would kill for an opportunity to play at Augusta National under any circumstances, and to have your first round ever at Augusta National just blows people away.
Yeah, it's like turning a kid loose with crayons on a Da Vinci painting, and that was me. But I always felt like I was pretty athletic, and what I understood from that day was the allure of golf, because I tell people I can't and never have been able to dunk a basketball. I played baseball pretty well, but I was never going to hit a baseball 400 feet.
Right.
But that day, there were certain tee shots or chips or putts, and you say to yourself, I just sank a 10-foot putt, or I just hit a pretty good drive right down the center of the fairway. I just hit a shot that, as I started playing more, you hit that shot that is as good as any pro could hit it. If it's a par 3 and you hit it and it's 2 feet away from the pin, that's as good as any pro can hit it. And I could see the addiction of the sport right then and there, because then you start saying to yourself, if I could do that with every shot.
Or for me,
that's what separates the men from the boys.
For me, when I played, and I haven't played in over a decade, but when I was playing fairly regularly and not very well, I would get frustrated and say, that's it. I'm never playing again when this round is over. And then I'd hit that one shot, and it would draw you back in. So for you to have that experience at Augusta National is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Peter, thank you so much for joining us and going over the amount of time that I said I would keep you. But
my pleasure, Dan.
I wanted people to hear that story, but more importantly, I wanted people to get a feel for this book you co-authored with Felipe Alou. Again, it's via Nebraska Press, and the best way to get it is Amazon.com. Peter, thank you so much.
Dan, nice catching up with you. All the best.
All right, I'll be in touch, my friend. Thanks.
Sure.
That was Peter Kerasotis. When we come back, we're running overtime, but we're going to stay overtime. Heath Burdette and his dad are with us, and we're going to talk about the Walk a Mile project. That is next here on the Dan Scott Show right after this break. When the Furman baseball team goes on the road, it travels safely, comfortably, and with the latest technology with Jeans Tours and Charters. Jeans has been a Furman favorite for decades and has serviced Furman baseball for over 20 years. Take it from head coach Brett Harker. Book your next road trip with Jeans. Jeans Tours and Charters online at jeansbussvc.com or call 864-242-1673. Jeans Tours and Charters, servicing the upstate since 1980.
If you've been sidelined by an injury, the St. Francis Sports Medicine team is here 24/7 to get you back on the field. Our highly trained network of physicians, athletic trainers, and physical therapists treat all types of sports-related injuries, even those that don't occur from playing a sport. Call the St. Francis Hurt Line at 675-HU-RT for priority appointments or at-home advice. Again, that's 675-HU-RT.
Let me tell you something, Cowboy. This rookie can really bring the heat.
He's smoky and spicy with a Chipotle style all his own.
It's a new Montgomery Inn Chipotle barbecue sauce. Make it a part of your home team.
Available now at your neighborhood grocer or online at CincyFavorites.com.
Welcome back to the Dan Scott Show. Again, our thanks to Peter Kerasotis for joining us in that last segment. And I told you I would be vindicated. I've told that story for years about knowing a guy whose first round of golf he ever played was at Augusta National, and I know that people didn't believe me. Now you know it's true, and Peter's the guy. And again, the book, Felipe Alou, My Baseball Journey, get your copy of it through Amazon, and you can find out much more about the Dominican Jackie Robinson, Felipe Alou. We are nice and crowded in here right now, and for a good reason. Immediately beside me, to my right, your left on the screen, is Heath Burdette. His father, the Reverend Eddie Burdette, is beside him. They are the brain trust or the inspiration behind the Walk a Mile project. You know, we talk about them every day here on the show. Show you this logo, send you to that website. And as mentioned, this is not necessarily a sports topic, but we feel like we've got a little bit of a higher calling here, and we're going to spend some time talking with these gentlemen about this for a while here today. Good to have you guys. It's good to be here. How you doing? You're going to need to get that microphone up so people can actually hear you.
How about that?
That's a little bit better. Heath, I'll start with you because you and I were the ones who kind of talked about this last year, and you started running the spots on the program. Tell me, just give our fans, our listeners here, an overview. I mean, I talk about it all the time, but from you, what is the Walk a Mile Project?
Well, Dan, the Walk a Mile Project is, of course, a 501c3.
Hang on 1 second. If you'll take those off and flip it the other way with the microphone on that side, that microphone will stay up a whole lot better. There we go.
Technology.
There we go.
Pastor and his mic.
That's right. I'm telling you, crazy.
All right, now.
But the Walk a Mile Project is a 501c3 humanitarian aid organization that me and my brother co-founded. Along with the rest of our family members. And what we do kind of in a nutshell is right now internationally, we're working in the country of Guatemala. And we provide houses and food and clothing, shoes. But most importantly, we're providing the gospel to the people of Guatemala. And we're working in a little town called Santa Rita, which has about 55,000 people in it. And we're just kind of to saturate that area right now before moving out to other areas.
What was the inspiration, or let me rephrase it, I know what the inspiration is. How did the inspiration come upon you to start this?
Well, the inspiration was my dad, who was sitting beside me since 1992. My dad took his first mission trip then, and since then has been all over the world. And during the time that, as I was growing older, I watched him from afar. I was able to participate in some, but not like what he was doing. So once, about 7 years ago, I guess, I had what I call a God dream. And that's really how the Walk a Mile Project started for me, is that I told my wife after it happened and what I saw. And then I said, well, I'm going to call my brother and just share my heart. And so I had lunch with my brother and his wife, and halfway through our conversation, he started finishing my sentences. So I said, okay, what's going on? He said, well, I had a God dream also. And we started doing the timeline and come to find out that it was about 2 weeks apart. So we knew that was, all right, this is it. So we scheduled a sit-down lunch with my dad because we didn't know what we were doing, to say the least. So we knew that he did, and he was working with another organization and helping lead trips for them. And unbeknownst to us, upon lunchtime, he told us that my mom and him had been praying for about 6 months now for something like this to happen.
Yeah.
So we just all knew as a family that it was just what we were meant to do.
And Eddie, as a father, we all, especially those who have sons, have these dreams or aspirations maybe of our sons following in our footsteps one day. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not good, but when you're dealing with such a higher calling here, when you're talking about sharing the gospel, it had to make you feel just wonderful.
It was absolutely amazing, Dan. We have I started going to other countries on mission trips in 1992. In November of 92, I took my first mission trip to Moscow, Russia, which was amazing, and it really changed my life during that time. And because I saw people that didn't even have a Bible during those days, in communist days, and it was really transforming. So over this 26-year period, our children have been able to experience going to Russia and going to Guatemala, to Mexico, and other countries that we've been to. And so for the last 12 years, we have focused in on Guatemala, and our children have really just jumped on board, and my wife and I couldn't be any more excited about it.
The work that you're doing there, when you initially started going there, Heath, how did the people of that particular area in Guatemala accept you? How receptive were they to the gospel, and how, if any, has that changed in the time since?
Well, Guatemalans are they're outside of the cities, or your main cities, in the little towns where we work at. It's a very mountainous area, very similar to what you kind of see here at Furman. But everything that they do is done by hand. So they grow everything that they have. And what they have is not a lot. So they're very grateful for anything and everything that you can do for them. But the people of Guatemala, what I've noticed is that they're looking for a helping hand, not a handout.
Right.
So they're very willing to, if you're, like when we go in, we build them a house, then they're very willing to jump in and help us at the drop of a hat. And just whatever you can provide, whether it's a pair of shoes, a pair of flip-flops, or a bag of food, then they're very, very open.
Yeah.
And they welcome us with loving arms, really.
But Eddie, how did you earn the trust of the people? I mean, that's the first step.
It is.
Relationship.
It is. It's absolutely that. We work with an organization that's there, that's a pastor, and he is over 110 churches that are in Guatemala. So he is the person that we really work with in his organization. And they go out into the village and pick out the church, the people for the homes to be built. And so they have knowledge of their people. So we're just really an extended arm for their group. And so when we go in, we'll be going in June 21st through 28th. Our goal is to build 20 homes, to feed 4 villages, and to pass out clothes and shoes and flip-flops, and give out gospel booklets and Bibles, and the time that we're there. And in that time frame, that's 5 days of building. We'll build 20 homes during that time.
In 5 days?
In 5 days.
And how many people were we talking about?
There'll be 20 people doing that in that 5-day period, and we will work. I mean, it is work, and but it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Because you're helping people who, for instance, a home costs $500 to build, and it's a small home. It's a 12 by 17. It's a wood frame, and then it has tin on the top and on the sides and on the front, and then it has a 2-inch concrete floor. And to us, it would be a shed, but to them, it's a Taj Mahal, because they live on dirt floors. And in their, like right now, it's a rainy season for them in Guatemala.
It's a rainy season for us, too.
Yeah,
It has been.
You, man. And so it is just, the water will flow through their house. And one dear lady, she said one time, now I have a home that water will not be able to get into my home. And she was about 75 years old, and when we built her a home. But they have told us this many times, Dan, is this: we could have never, ever saved $500. So $500 to them is no different than $500,000 to us. And but it means everything to them.
We are visiting with Heath Burdette and his father, Eddie, and talking about the Walk a Mile project, which we tell you about every day here on the show, or at least the days that we have a show. This is the first one we've done in a week because of the Southern Conference Baseball Tournament. But again, the website, thewhamproject.org. is the place to go to get more information there. Besides actually boots on the ground in Guatemala, the other aspect of what you do is training people to do what you do, right?
Right. Yeah, we our ultimate goal is with our immediate family members. I mean, there's only so many of us. Is to actually train up leaders with other churches or those that participate with us to where you can't always go as the head front or the president. So you always want to have somebody on the ground that's able to continue doing what you're doing. So you just show them. We're just showing people what we've learned pretty much from my dad and other experiences.
And have you found that you have a lot of people who are willing to come and learn so they can go and do some of these things?
Yes, sir. We stay very busy. We have a number of churches that go with us. Matter of fact, we are taking a church in July from Kentucky. We took a church from Kentucky in March to go and do medical missions and build homes and all too. So it's the neatest thing to see people, because they really, when they go on their first trip, they really don't have what's going to happen, and they really don't understand. But after that first day, oh man, they just lock in, and it's on from that point. And the Guatemalans are such a hard-working people. They're the hardest working people. They're the strongest people I have been around. They build, or they grow their corn, and for them to on the side of a mountain. So in front of us here at Furman, looking at this mountain where all the trees are, well, that would be a cornfield from top to bottom. And they do it all by hand. There's no machinery that you could put up there. They do it all by hand. And they use a hoe, not like ours, which is about that wide. They have a hoe that's about that wide. And I brought one home to my dad one year. And I said, "This is the hoe that you need to use in your garden." And he said, "You've lost your mind." So it was pretty funny. But hardworking people, greatest people, just grateful people, and thankful people for what God does for them and for what God's people do for them.
We're visiting with Heath directly beside me, and Eddie, his father, part of the Burdette family and the Walk a Mile project, who they themselves spend a lot of time in Guatemala. You've been hearing what they do there, and they also train and equip other people to go many different places. My wife has been to the Dominican once. She's been to Mexico 3 or 4 times. She and I together last summer went to Calgary, which is a totally different kind of trip, because we were working with a church plant in a very affluent neighborhood. And it's interesting, those are the people a lot of times that are the hardest to reach, because they've got everything and feel like they don't need God. Whereas you go into, like where she went in the mountains of Mexico, where you guys are doing in Guatemala, these are poor people who have nothing.
Right.
They absolutely have nothing. So the dynamic is different, but the spiritual need is exactly the same.
Absolutely. We may not have the same amount of money. We may not live in the same type homes. We may not have the same type vehicles and those kind of things. But our need for Christ is for everybody. Everybody's the same at the foot of the cross. And but we find out, like in Guatemala, for instance, these people are they're the type of people, for instance, if they live in a village, if they live in this area of Greenville, then most of the people will never leave a 10-mile radius of their village. So what they did 50 years ago in gardening and taking care of their family and all, that's exactly what they're doing today. And it doesn't change from generation to generation. It's pretty wild. But it's the neatest thing, because you're dealing with people that have a kind heart. They have a heart of reception, but a heart of thankfulness. And it's tough for them, because we all have pride. We all want to, do it ourselves, and that kind of deal. But they don't have that capability of doing that. And most of them is that in the village, when you get into the mountains, they only have like a 3rd grade education, and but they're hard workers. I mean, they don't sit in the house and they have to get out in the fields. They have to get out there and work and to raise their corn to where they can have the tortillas and that their wives are going to be cooking, and they have to get into the woods and cut wood for their wives to be able to make a fire and to where in the stove to where they can cook. And they have to do that every day, you know. And when I say mountains, it's not like our mountains here. We'll build houses 8,000 to 9,000 feet above sea level. And they walk that all the time. It's pretty wild. They are wonderful people to deal with. Absolutely.
The Facebook feed that we have going on, you guys have some fans who have checked in. Shane and Vanessa. Vanessa is here, and Brooke Long. You know, I recognize that name there, Brooke Burdette Long.
Yes.
So yeah, you guys have some folks who have checked in, and we're glad to have them watching, and everybody else is as we tell the story here of the Walk a Mile project. What's the future hold for you guys?
Oh, the future is a damn one day at a time. But we have trips coming up. We have upcoming trips, like my dad said, and I'm taking a medical team in June, the middle of June, for a week. The next week he's coming in, and they're going to be building houses and feeding villages. We have another trip coming up in July with the church out of Kentucky that's going with us, and then also another trip in November. That is right now open to really anyone out there that would like to go with us. And we'll be passing out Christmas presents during that time frame, which is a lot of fun. We get to play Santa Claus. But, yeah, we're just following, really just following God's will for the Walk a Mile project. Just really one day at a time. And if anybody out there that would like to contact us or call us or get some more information, then feel free to, either via our website or also on Facebook at the Walk a Mile Project.
Yeah, and I think probably the easiest way, because all the contact information is on the website.
Absolutely.
So I can just pop that up, and again, it's thewhamproject.org. Eddie, my dad's a preacher.
Is he? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
he pastored the same church in West Virginia for 37 years, and now he is he's retired from that, but still preaching at different places, probably 7-8 times a month. So it's not an occupation; it's a calling, as you know.
That's right.
When you got into it, did you ever think that God was going to lead you in this particular direction?
No, sir. I had no idea. I had served in church in Anderson. And I'd gone to Greenwood, served in a church there, and then I had gone to Atlanta, the Atlanta area, and we were about 20 miles southeast of Atlanta at a church. And a friend of mine had gotten in touch with me about he's an evangelist from Atlanta, and said, "Look, I'd like for you to go to Russia with us. My brother and I are taking a team to Russia," and so I that was the furthest thing from my mind. But as I prayed about it, the Lord said, "I want you to go there." And I had no idea, Dan, that was going to be such a change in my life, such a breaking point in my life, because the Lord really broke my heart for those people. And I saw people that were desperate. I still, when we go to Guatemala, I still see that desperation there in a lot of people's lives. And so when I've been to 8 countries now, and I just got back just a few weeks ago from Norway for the first time, and that's different. That's totally different from going to Guatemala. But as you said earlier, the need is for people to know that Christ loves them, that He died on the cross for them, that He gave His life for them, and that He wants to save us all. He wants to forgive everybody of their sins, and He wants to help us. Life, He didn't create and put us on this earth to try to do life without Him. He has a magnificent world that He's created, and He's got magnificent people that are on it. But the only hope that we have is to know Him and to follow Him and to understand He's here to help us. He's here to change our lives, and He's here to use us. Well, in these 26 years that we have been doing missions, and I've been a pastor for 35 years, is that it has literally let us see a whole different side of the world and changed our perspective. on life.
As a preacher's son and a Baptist on top of that, I'm about ready to pass the plate and take up a collection in here. We just had church, man. That's the way it goes. Anything else? I know you came prepared with some information. Anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to get out before we wrap it up?
Well, we've talked a lot about us, and I'll let my dad kind of explain what he has in front of him. But anyone can go to our website, what you said, thewhamproject.org, and some of the biggest needs, like we said before, are we build the houses, we feed the villages. Clean water is something that is huge in Guatemala, a big need for. So I'll turn it over to him and kind of but you can access all that information. People can access all that information if they want to donate to any of those, and the cost is on there also. That's a huge need that the Walk a Mile Project has and needs, is the funding.
All right, thank you, Heath. Yep. And Dan, thank you for having us on. And as we share about this, we go to build homes, and that's one of our areas. And it costs $500 to build a 12 by 17 home in Guatemala, and it's made out of tin and wood, and it's got a 2-inch concrete floor to where they'll have dry floors. And we are told that it will last from now on. It's just it's a very durable home that we build there. Mm-hmm. And then we also provide clean water systems for the families, and it costs $50 for this clean water system. It has a charcoal filter in it that will last a year, and they can have 10 gallons of clean water per day to drink and to cook with. And it changes their life. It totally changes their lives because there's so many parasites and bacteria that's in their water. 70% of the sickness are in the mountains is because of the unclean water, and so we provide that for them and for each family, and that's one of our goals there too, to do that. We also feed these families, and we can do 100 families for $700, and for that $700, it provides each family enough food for 1 month, and so we have learned from friends and other people that are in Guatemala to where to go shop, and it's able to provide food. They get to come through a line and take a bag, and we'll fill that bag to the top. Plus, also we provide flip-flops and shoes and those kind of items for them too. There's 3 things that a man will have. He'll have a pair of rubber boots, and he's going to have a machete, and he's going to have one of those hoes that we were talking about. And his little boy is going to be the same way. And so they're going to be out in the field every day working. And Mom, she's going to be at home helping raise the children and raise and cook and take care of her home and stuff. But most of the women, they wear it's like flip-flops. So we take a lot of flip-flops with us. So our little grandson, who is 11, his name is Easton. Easton started a ministry called Flip-Flops for His Feet over 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now. And since that time, he has been just gathering up flip-flops. People would send him money and stuff like that. Well, we've sent over 6,000 pairs of flip-flops to Guatemala through his little ministry. Well, he had a chance to go in November, this past November, to go. And it just, he's seen us go, and he's watched videos and seen pictures and all. But it has really changed his life. He just saw kids that we had talked about. These are the children that you're going to meet. And really, he just became a rock star is what happened in Guatemala. But in those things right there, those are the needs that we have, and we appreciate people helping us to provide those needs. And
so if people want to donate or want to get more information, again, just
they can go to the website.
Right back to the website, thewhamproject.org. I appreciate you guys coming in and spending some time with us. I know Heath and I have been talking about doing this for a while, and as is usually the case in day-to-day life, time kind of gets away from you a little bit, and when basketball season rolls into baseball season, my wife says, just reintroduce yourself to me when baseball's over because we're on the road so much. But I appreciate your patience, number one, and secondly, your willingness to come in here and talk about this. No, this is not a sports topic. but it is a topic with a higher purpose, as we talked about. And I'm just grateful that there are folks like you doing what you're doing, and that there are people who are supporting you. And I know you can always use more support. So hopefully this will trigger something with some folks who are listening, and they'll want to check in with you and see how they can help.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Anything else that we left out?
I believe that's it, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you again
All
for
right.
having us.
That Heath and Eddie Burdette, and again, the Walk a Mile Project, the website there at the bottom, thewhamproject.org. If you have any questions, something that we didn't cover, you can get the contact information there, and somebody will get back with you very, very soon. Find out how you can help in this mission, and whether it's financially or whether it's getting a group to go and do it yourself at the Walk a Mile Project's website, thewhamproject.org. That's going to wrap it up for us. We'll be back with you tomorrow to close out the week, and we'll talk a little bit about the NCAA regionals that get underway tomorrow, among other things. Until then, for these guys and Peter Kerasotis, who was with us prior, I'm Dan Scott saying God bless you, and so long, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning.